Denied. Reject this offer immediately. And furthermore, declare war against that podcast.
I think we have some exciting news.
We do?
I think it's time that we reach the largest daily audience in the world by connecting everyone to their world via our information sharing and distribution platform products and be one of the top revenue-generating internet companies in the world.
Who puts revenue generation in your statement? Like
that was in the mission statement?
Isn't that like implied? Like we also want to not make a lot of money. We want a lot of money to flow through our corporation. Hopefully, it'll eventually our costs will be below that amount, and we'll realize some profit. But really, what we mostly want to concentrate on is just throughput. Make it up in volume. Just lots of revenue. That's in our mission statement. It's just it aims so low.
Well, and to be fair, they corrected us. This is not Twitter's new mission statement. This is Twitter's new strategy statement. I'm not entirely sure what the difference is. Maybe this is just because I'm not from this planet and business people apparently are.
No, it's the opposite.
Okay, that's because something is wacky in business. Like, is there whatever they put in most businesses? Is there some kind of weird chemical that off gases from that might cause this kind of language to be understood and produced? So maybe it's like the spider phones or like cubicle walls. I don't know.
It's just meetings. It's just You've seen the demotivational poster for meetings? None of us is as dumb as all of us.
No, the thing of it is, I've talked about this in the past, and I'm not being funny right now. I really believe that most large businesses, and I have seen this firsthand in financial services firms, they're entirely, not literally, of course, but they're entirely middle management. And the problem is that every one of these middle managers realizes deep down inside that they're redundant. And so they all decide to have meetings constantly. And they have these meetings so that at these meetings, all of the middle managers can stick up their peacock tails and say, ooh, look at me. I'm so smart. I'm not redundant. It's all you idiots that are the redundant ones. And that's that. This is the same thing that happens with lawyers. They make up these ridiculous reasons to exist simply so that they can continue to exist. It's completely self-serving and ridiculous. I mean, look at reach the largest daily audience in the world by connecting everyone to their world via our information sharing and distribution platform products and be one of the top revenue generating internet companies in the world. I know you read that before. I'm reading it again and I am miserable.
Why don't you just tell us what it is? Because we've just been talking about this as if everyone knows, and some poor person is going to be listening to this 6 months from now and have no idea what we're talking about.
This is the recently unveiled Twitter strategy statement. At first, everyone thought it was a mission statement. It was later corrected to be a strategy statement it was unveiled on some kind of investor presentation that they held today. My favorite part is platform products.
Yeah, that's where you stop being able to parse the sentence, and you're like, is there missing punctuation, or is this a typo? Or
I mean, the whole thing is a tremendous run-on sentence that really could benefit from some commas. You can tell they don't even write, they don't write very well. This doesn't even fit in a tweet, as many people pointed out. As either a mission or a strategy statement, it is, I would say, weak at best.
And it doesn't finish strong. It gets worse, especially at the bottom. So revenue, I just made fun of. Putting that in there just seems crass. And putting revenue instead of product just seems dumb. But the best part is it's one of the top. Like, they're not even going to say number one. They're not going to say biggest. They're just going to be like, we just want to be a contender for money moving through our organization, really. We're not going to say we're going to be number one. Like, everyone makes fun of Google's don't be evil thing or whatever, but their mission statement or whatever. Isn't it like indexing all the world's information or something like that? And Microsoft's was the old, a computer on every desk running Microsoft software. Like, those are simple, easy to understand goals that don't say we really want our share price to be high. Our goal is to make our CEO's options worth so much that he can retire in 5 years and buy an island. Like, you might as well just put that in your mission statement. Jason Snell in the chat room said his company's mission statement at one point included revenue per employee.
Wow.
That's amazing.
It's just aiming low. It's terrible. It's almost like you could say you can think that, but don't write it down. But really, you shouldn't even be thinking that. Like, it's, when Microsoft and Google both have more noble, more inspirational mission statements than you do, you're not doing well.
Well, and what this shows, it's obviously like this is a sentence designed by so much committee.
Yep.
I don't think it's a sentence.
There's all the there's all these clauses that are bolted on that don't really need to be there, and they reflect every department had a bolt on, or the leadership couldn't decide what to say, and so they said everything. All of which is funny because that all kind of seems to reflect Twitter's kind of wacky, weak leadership. That Twitter has always had leadership issues from the founders coming kind of in and out, and different CEOs and business people coming in and out. Like, they've always had really seemingly unstable leadership. I mean, Dick Costolo, I think, has been there the longest out of anybody who's been near the top. But it's always just kind of been all over the place. And what they have with this sentence is a very clear indicator to the outside world that they still have struggles up at the very top with getting what the direction of the company might even be, or who gets to get recognized or whatever. Like this, it's a little thing. This is not a major disaster or anything, but it's an indicator of the kind of sloppy, possibly out of touch, possibly shot in the dark kind of leadership that they have. I mean, look at I would reach the largest daily audience in the world. You could end it right there and be done. It's still a little weird.
Although that is what do you mean reach? When you've reached them, what have you done? You're not, you know what I mean? The Google thing, they're whatever they're doing, indexing the world's information. They're taking all the information in the world, they want to bring it all in and organize it and make it accessible in a way. They're doing a useful thing. They're saying there's information, it's hard to do anything with it. We, Google, have this massive ambition that all the information in the world will take it in and we'll make it so that you can do something useful with it, right? That is a useful thing.
Well, and even the next clause is also pretty good. Connect everyone to their world. That alone, it doesn't say a lot, but it's better than the whole, Yeah. And then of course the end, be one of the top revenue generating internet companies in the world. Okay, if that's what you want to be, fine. But this could, if anybody with editing permission got a hold of this, it probably would have been better to just say connect everyone to their world. That's it. That's all you need to say out of this entire 65-word sentence that's awful.
But even that is just really weak. It doesn't seem like they know what it would have been a more fun meeting to take these same people who came up with this and say, what do you think Twitter is doing now? What do people use Twitter for? Twitter is a thing that exists, right? You guys run the company. So can you describe what it is that Twitter is right now? Not what you want it to be, not what you want the company to be, not what your mission is, but right now there is something called Twitter and people use it, and try to describe that. And I don't think they could, because I don't think they're Twitter users. Or I don't think they understand what value that Twitter has. That would have been a more instructive exercise for them.
Yeah, I would be shocked if most of Twitter's top leadership really use Twitter very heavily.
Yeah, I don't get this. And I keep coming back to what you were saying earlier, Marco, that this is definitely designed by committee. What not a mission statement. What do we call it? Strategy statement?
A strategy statement.
Thank you. This strategy statement seems like the text-based equivalent of a website's carousel. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where, there are 10 different groups that all are convinced that they should be the hero image on this website. And what ends up happening is nobody wants to make a tough decision. And so they just say, screw it. We'll put it on a rotating carousel and that'll be good enough. This is the text version of that. Just like you were saying, everyone, you get 3 words apiece and we'll just mash them together in some way that vaguely resembles English. So bad. So bad. All right. You want to do some follow-up?
There was one other thing I was trying to think about with the Twitter thing, and I totally lost my mind. Maybe it'll come back to me later.
Maybe the strategy statement melted your brain.
Probably.
No, it definitely did. Although I was proud of myself that I remembered the demotivational poster word for word without looking it up.
All right. So let's talk about App Store not allowing purchase of bundles.
Yeah, I didn't have an example of that last time. I still don't have an example, but I think the same person, Colin Peckran, who sent in the original thing, sent us a screenshot. And the weird thing about the screenshot, if you take a look at it, is it just gets rid of the purchase button. I mean, it's not a big screenshot. It's cropped, so I can't see, but basically there's no purchase button. He's got a big red arrow saying, this is where the purchase button would be. And if he didn't include another shot showing the purchase button, that it would be there, I wouldn't understand what the arrow was pointing to. So basically, if someone stumbles upon one of these bundles, it's good, I guess, that the App Store won't let you buy it for more than it would cost you just to buy the one app you're missing. But it's kind of weird. Maybe somewhere else on the page it tells you why there's no purchase button.
This is like bug fix by display none.
Right, exactly. It's maybe a button that says, here's the problem. What would you put in the button? You can't buy this because it would cost you more than buying the individual app. Does not fit in the button. And then try it in German, right? So it's not gonna work out. I don't know. Bundles are a mess. Anyway, thought I'd throw that in there. We'll put it in the show notes.
I'm still honestly trying to figure out why Apple made bundles. Obviously it was not for upgrade price hacks. That's obviously not the intent here. Otherwise it would work better for that. I really wonder, it seems to only benefit. Obviously, it only benefits paid apps. I don't think in-app purchases can contribute in any possible way to this. And Apple usually doesn't do anything to help paid apps because most of the apps that actually get downloaded aren't paid apps, and most of the money in the App Store does not come from paid apps anymore. I think the number is something like 10% or something of the money comes from paid apps. It's some kind of very low number by most of the reports that try to measure it. So I wonder what was the goal here? Was it some kind of weird, serve certain game companies kind of thing? I honestly have no idea.
It's a sales tool. It's yet another thing that Apple can do to make software cheaper, if you think of it in that light, right? So there are some apps that are paid, and it's like, well, we can't make those people make their apps free, but maybe we can make it so that the cost of those apps is less by letting people bundle them up, so that if people were going to buy these 3 apps anyway, now you can buy those 3 apps for less money. It's basically just lowering the purchase price. All sorts of sale tactics. Obviously, free is magic, but people like lower prices as well. So the price of individual apps gets driven down. But this is a tool to say, if you make a suite of applications and people aren't going to buy them individually for $2.99 each because that's just too much money. So put them all into a bundle together for $5. Put 4 $2.99 apps into the bundle for $5, and then you basically once again found a way to lower the price of software for customers. They get more software for less money. That's my guess. I mean, because that's Apple's big thing is they want software to be cheap, and if there are some applications that are not cheap, they're like, what if we get? And it's good, it's a win-win for the developer too. They say you have multiple apps, but you're having trouble selling them individually. What if we gave you a way to sell them together for a lower price? That would save the consumer money. Anyone who was going to buy both of those apps anyway saves money, and you maybe make a sale where you wouldn't before, because before it's perceived as a bargain. It's the same reason everything is on sale all the time at the big department stores.
Right, but still, it just seems like Apple is doing something pretty redundant here. If they're trying to reduce the price that paid software sells for, they can just do that by inaction, because everything else about the App Store encourages prices to go down to free.
People love bundles, though. Back when I was at the ebook store place, we had many different kinds of bundles, and they were a popular thing to have. We like making them. People like buying them. I'm surprised more electronic store. I mean, I guess they kind of do. Does the iTunes store do that when you complete this album? Is it always just straight math, or do you get a bargain?
I believe it is straight math, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Oh, well. Anyway, bundles. It's a thing.
Free slogan. They can have that.
Yeah.
How about iWork? Is iWork a thing?
iWork, speaking of bundles and cheaper software. So John G., not John Gruber, wrote in just to comment on what I said about iWork, about how having a mediocre to crappy Office type program doesn't make Apple's hardware more valuable. It doesn't help Apple sell hardware in the way that iLife used to back when iLife was really good. iWork has never been really good and doesn't really help sell Macs. If anything, maybe it's just neutral. And John G. says that he thinks they're all defensive strategies to ensure the companies don't get squeezed out. He says, what if the Surface 6th generation is amazingly caught up to the iPad and comes with Office free? Apple might get squeezed out. So basically by having its own Office suite, they're not beholden to Microsoft, and they won't be afraid that whatever their platform is, iPad or whatever, will become less viable if Microsoft suddenly decides they don't want to offer Office for iOS. Now, first of all, the odds at this point of Microsoft not offering Office for iOS seem very low, since Microsoft seems very gung-ho on cross-platform these days. Second of all, Office wasn't on iOS for a really long time, didn't seem to hurt it. But the biggest counter-argument to this idea that Apple needs to make an Office suite so they don't get squeezed out by someday having Office taken away or something is that Apple having a mediocre Office suite subsidized by hardware profits makes it way harder for third-party developers to make a living selling Office type applications. Like iWork as a free thing, and I think it's free now, right? All the time. Comes with new devices anyway. You can just download the apps automatically, right?
Right.
that makes it really hard for anybody else to try to make Office-style applications. Microsoft can because they're subsidized by whatever is making them money, and I think they just made Office for iOS free or something like that.
But mostly, sort of.
Yeah, I know. It's always confusing with the 365 thing, and subscriptions and everything.
It's mostly free.
Yeah, but so if Apple was really concerned about making its platform not too reliant on Office or any other particular type of thing, the best thing it could do is foster a thriving market for Office-type applications. And by putting tons of money into iWork and then giving it away for free, or at the very least, as it was before, below cost, that makes it impossible for you to have a thriving ecosystem of Office applications. You're basically guaranteeing it's only just you versus Office. So I think rather than iWork being neutral, it's actually, in terms of the fear of being squeezed out, it's actually a negative because they're making sure that no one else will ever try to make a suite of Office applications because, Microsoft plus Apple are both making sure that no one else is going to try to do that. And so we're at the mercy of Microsoft, which so far hasn't been that great, and iWork, which also has not been that great.
How about the RIMAC GPU being throttled? Is that a thing?
I think it is a thing, at least for people who are interested in playing games in Windows. A lot of people sent me this link to Mac Rumors forum thread about iMac 5K GPU throttling. And it started where someone was doing some gaming benchmarks in Windows and boot camp on iMac 5K and saw that the GPU would start throttling way below the temperature is supposed to. So according to this person, he thinks that the GPU is supposed to start throttling at 105 degrees Celsius, and instead it started throttling seconds after it started to be used in Windows. It would start throttling 70 degrees Celsius. So that's not good, but that could just be bad Windows drivers. And lots of people in the rest of this thread talk about, maybe better boot camp drivers will come out and this will be a problem. But then other people later in the thread said, it's not just Windows. I can run a game on my Mac, and it's really easy to get the GPU up to 105 degrees Celsius. And for people who don't know what Celsius is, that's really hot. 100 degrees Celsius is the boiling point of water, right?
Yes.
Yeah, as the Americans confidently say, yes, Celsius. Anyway, the point is that's really hot. And a lot of people in the thread are concerned that this is near the thermal limits of the GPU. It's going to shorten the life of the GPU. Then other people in the thread say, don't you think Apple would have tested this with temperatures? And other people come back with, well, look at all these historic GPU failures in Apple portable machines. So at the very least, this is not encouraging if you're planning on gaming on an iMac. Temperatures aside, if you're not worried about the particular temperatures, or maybe it's the way it's measured because it's peak temperature instead of at the edge of the die or whatever, I think the more important point is, in this other link that we'll put in the show notes, is the gaming benchmarks. So ignore temperatures. Ignore temperatures entirely. Ignore the longevity of your GPU, whatever that may or may not be. If you look at gaming benchmarks, like this Bare Feets thing did, of the new fanciest 5K iMac versus the lesser GPU in the 5K iMac versus the old non-Retina iMac, the top of the line iMac you can buy is not even the fastest iMac ever made, depending on your game. And when it does win, it doesn't win by a large margin. So these benchmarks are kind of depressing from game. It's not bad game performance, it's fine, but you would expect, this to be a next generation iMac with an entirely different GPU. You would expect it to do better than the previous generation GPU. And for the most part, it does, but it's not a really convincing win in a couple benchmarks that actually is a little bit slower. And so regardless of throttling, that's not great either. So it's kind of not, I would say a mixed bag with a lot of unknowns right now for the 5K iMac. I don't know much about the temperature stuff. I can't really tell if this is crazy or not, although people running similar benchmarks against their old iMacs are getting way lower temperatures. And you can't tell, is that because the sensor is showing the temperature at a different location? What is the reasonable temperature for this GPU? Is it okay for it to be showing a measurement of 105 degrees Celsius all the time? The throttling in Windows seems like a driver issue. It shouldn't be throttling at 70 degrees Celsius. And so that's really killing Windows gaming performance there. So I don't know. Anyway, depressing thread for anyone who is looking forward to gaming on their iMac 5K.
I think you're right, John. That is disappointing. It doesn't affect me or my priorities at all, but that is disappointing. For whatever it's worth, I've been running the iStat Menus fan monitor just so I could get an idea of like, when the fan spins up, under what temperatures, under what kind of load, just so I can have some idea of how this computer behaves. Right now, it's letting the CPUs idle at about 130 Fahrenheit. I don't have this in Celsius mode, sorry. You'll have to do your own translations. But CPUs are idling at about 130, GPUs idle at about 100, when I'm just sitting here doing not much. I've noticed that the fan will only spin up on the CPU. Well, it's one fan in the whole system, but the fan will spin up when the CPU temperature reaches about 190 Fahrenheit. So it's getting very close to that 100 Celsius number before the fan even spins up. It doesn't ever cross 200. So it's keeping it right below whatever that is in Celsius, like 95 or whatever. It's keeping the CPUs right below that under full load. But it's not spinning up at all until then, whatever that's worth. Anyway, but yeah, I have found so far in my kind of use, I'm actually extremely happy. The more I use this machine, the happier I am with it. It is really, really nice. I mean, it's like, even like I mentioned last week, the fan noise under full load. I did the one test with the full load fan noise, then I didn't load it up like that for a few days, and like the memory of it got louder in my mind over those few days. And then like when I ran a Handbrake conversion the other day for a totally legal movie file that a totally legal podcast friend of mine got me for a totally legal BBC car show. When I ran a Handbrake transcode of that file to make it on my totally legal Apple TV, I was matching out the CPUs again, and the fan was way quieter than I imagined it in my head. Like it is loud. It is like a laptop fan in that when it spins to full speed, you will hear it. But it is, I'd say a little quieter than a 15-inch Retina MacBook Pro fan. After all, like it's similar kind of noise, a little quieter, still noticeable, still audible, still annoying if it's always that loud. But either way, I would say this is a computer that is really great if you're not loading up to full blast every day constantly. If full blast on the CPUs or GPUs is an occasional thing, then that's great, and it won't be a problem.
Yeah, that's the concern about this for gaming, is because people who game like spend just hours with everything going full tilt.
Right, and that I would be concerned.
If you're doing a first-person shooter, just hours and hours a day for months and months on end. And what people are saying about the old iMac problems and other things is that it doesn't kill it right away, but like by the time your AppleCare runs out, if you bought like a couple extra years of AppleCare, just around that point, just from the constantly running at a very high temperature, and what they're saying is it shortens the life of the components. And if the gaming performance was like this, where it's like, it's mostly faster than the previous top end, but not really by much, and in a few benchmarks it's a little bit under, you'd be like, okay, if it was like also lower power and cooler and quieter, but it's like, it seems almost like a downgrade, whereas the previous one got similar benchmark numbers running it at a lower indicated temperature according to whatever these sensors are. So it gives the feeling that what am I doing all this stuff for? More what do you call it? More VRAM, I guess, because I don't think the other one had 4 gigs. But it's not. This doesn't look like a good GPU upgrade from the previous one. It's more kind of like a lateral move at best.
Right, and this is, I mean, I continue to believe. Like if you're looking at the Mac lineup with the goal of playing games, like playing high end games a lot, I think you're going to be sad. And there's just not a lot of greatness to that. Like if the best case scenario is you buy a Mac Pro, which is spending a lot of money for a video card that actually isn't very good at gaming. Like it can do it, but it's like you're not getting your money's worth on the video card because that's not really what you're paying for. You're not paying for gaming ability on the Mac Pro's $5,000 purchase price. So really, I continue to say that your best choice if you want to play PC games is to either settle for a game console or build a gaming PC, because it's
gaming console is not an equivalent for PC games. People who want to play PC games need a keyboard and a mouse.
Right. So then build a gaming PC. It's like you can build a great gaming PC for like $1,200.
Well, I wouldn't call it great.
Well, better if you wanted to match the current Mac Pro with its best video card option, I bet you could build a gaming PC that has roughly similar gaming performance as that for totally off the top of my head, I would say $1,500 or less.
Oh, yeah, but we're not talking about performance. Like when you say a great PC, like the reason people buy Macs is they're not just interested in what is the frame rate for amount of money. Like obviously they would just get a gaming PC if you wanted to do that. But what you're looking for from a Mac is like the whole package. You want it nice and elegant and not lots of extraneous stuff, and you're sure it'll all work together and you don't have to worry about driver issues, and it looks nice. And in the case of the Mac Pro, it's quiet and it's cool and interesting and all that stuff, So the Mac Pro is still the best gaming Mac, which is sad because it's got, like you said, not a great video card for gaming, and you just pay a tremendous amount of money for it.
Anyway, speaking of better deals than that, we are brought to you this week by our friends at Squarespace. Go to squarespace.com and enter offer code ATP at checkout to get 10% off. Squarespace, start here, go anywhere. It's a new slogan. I like it. They just released Squarespace 7. This is a big update. Squarespace lets you build a website, and they host your website, and they let you design the website and edit your website. You can put all sorts of stuff on your website. You could, they give you beautiful designs. Everything is simple and powerful. Everything is drag and drop, customizable, extremely easy to use. If you do need help, they have support, 24/7 email support and live chat. So Squarespace 7 added a whole bunch of new stuff. Editing your page is done live right on the site. Like your site kind of slides over slightly, and there's a little sidebar that comes in, and you just edit your page literally right there live on your page. It's like what you see is what you get, taken to the extreme. And then you can also do things like you can simulate iPhone size, iPad size. You can simulate all these different devices. You can see how your site and how your changes will look on narrow screens, which is really nice. Squarespace 7 also added a really cool partnership with Getty Images, where now if you have, let's say you're making a post and you need an image for a blog post, or you need like a stock image for the background of your site, for the header, for a special page you're making or whatever. Squarespace worked out this awesome deal where 40 million of Getty's photos are available within Squarespace with this awesome UI, and you just pay $10 one time to use an image, and that's it. Like you pay the $10 to use the image that you want, and it's up there forever. They also have cover pages in Squarespace 7, where if you want to put up a temporary or permanent like splash page before you enter your site, it can have a whole different design from the rest of your site. It lets you look really cool and trendy. And if you want to like promote a special event that you're doing, or a sale that you're having, or a new thing you just launched, or a major announcement, you can do all that with a cover page, and they just look fantastic. I can't possibly over explain to you how great all this stuff looks. You can also host a store. They have commerce. That's not new, but it's still really cool. Anyway, all this is great. Go to Squarespace. You can start a free trial with no credit card required. Start building your website today. When you decide to sign up, make sure to use the offer code ATP to get 10% off your first purchase and to show your support for our show. We thank Squarespace very much. Squarespace, start here, go anywhere.
So let's talk about trim for a second. We brought this up last episode with regard to John's new purchase, and we got some feedback about that, John.
Yes, this is from a former Apple engineer. This is something we didn't mention in the past show, but it's worth clarifying in case people were wondering. Why is it that Apple initially only supported trim on its own drives, and to this day still doesn't support it on a lot of third-party drives? Is it a punitive thing where Apple wants you to buy their drives and doesn't want to support trim on third-party drives? No, not really. The reason they don't support trim on third-party drives, the same reason Apple doesn't support a lot of third-party stuff, is they want to decrease their support burdens. They sort of they whitelist which devices they can send trim commands to. And this former Apple engineer says that in the first 2 years after trim showed up as a thing, a lot of the flash controllers out there had firmware that would trim the wrong range of blocks. So the OS would tell it to trim a certain set of blocks, and it would do it like off by one, or even worse, there was taking logical block numbers and using them as physical block numbers with no mappings. And there was other bugs like not invalidating the trim in the queue if a later write was given for the block. So basically bugs. That if Apple simply said, "Oh, we'll support trim everywhere, and we'll send the correct trim commands to any third-party drive you plug in," that would be bad, because Apple knew for a fact that there were many buggy drives out there that would do bad things if you sent the trim command, some of which could result in data loss. So what they did is the typical Apple thing of they made sure that their own SSDs that they shipped worked with the trim command. And said some of them, the internal flash shipped with firmware that Apple wrote, or firmware that they could get in source code form and could modify. And later on, when some firmware came from the vendors that was okay, Apple whitelisted it. And so basically, if you connect an SSD to OS X, If it's not one of the ones that Apple is absolutely sure is going to behave correctly, either because they wrote the firmware or they qualified it as an internal drive, or they've whitelisted it as a exact third party make and model and drive that works correctly, they don't do it. And that is the most conservative approach and the safest approach. But I could probably also guess that Apple does not spend a lot of its time buying every single third party SSD, testing its trim support, and increasing the size of that whitelist, which is why, the third-party hack, the trim enabler thing is out there. If you feel like you have a drive that you're sure responds correctly to trim commands and would benefit from using them, you could use that enabler. But then in Yosemite, they have the kernel, extension signing thing. Listen to the previous show for all the details on that. So if anyone thought that our description last week was implying that Apple was malicious in this case, at worst, you could say they're lazy because they're not buying and qualifying every single drive so they can increase the sizes of their whitelist. But at best, they're just being typical conservative Apple and trying to keep their driver burden low. So, and I think a couple other people who sent information about, I think we alluded to this last week, the utility of the trim command may or may not be lessened depending on the little storage computer that's inside of each of your SSDs and how it manages storage. Again, the drive can't know when blocks are freed up for use, but it can make more intelligent decisions about write leveling and stuff like that. So, as I said last week, I am open to the idea that my Samsung 850 Pro that I have will eventually get super slow. And I'm also open to the idea that if that happens, it's possible that enabling trim using this hack will solve the problem for me. But until the first problem happens, I am not interested in the experiment of discovering whether the second thing solves the problem or causes more.
Fair enough. And then do we want to briefly talk about whether or not the 6 Plus is selling well?
Yeah, what was that? Like last week, it's that 50/50 number came from the T-Mobile CEO or something. He was saying, the 6 Plus seemed to be in about even numbers, and who knows what that means from T-Mobile. Here's another one from this Localytics company that is some kind of app analytics company, and they gave numbers that are closer to my original prediction from, I think, right after the phones were announced, that I expected the 6 to way outsell the 6 Plus, and Localytics says that the 6 is outselling the 6 Plus 6-1. And as usual, Apple says nothing, so we don't know, but we'll put the link in the show notes. Now we have two extremely widely varying guesses, both from unreliable sources, but I'm still very curious. I mean, what have you guys seen like out in the wild when you've seen people with iPhone 6s? What is your ratio of spotting 6 Pluses to 6s?
I don't go outside.
When we get chicken salad, nobody in line at the deli has...
I have not seen a single 6 Plus in the deli.
Yeah, I've seen a handful of 6 Pluses. Is that true? I think I've seen only one or two, and I know a handful of people that have them. And I remember when I was asking around the time that everyone was making purchases, so I was asking around amongst all of our friends like Mike Hurley and Ben Thompson and Ray Ritchie and all of them. At that point, I would say it was like 2/3 6s, 1/3 6 Pluses, although I do believe some of these people have relented and gone to 6 from 6 Plus. So I'd say it's not 6-1, but certainly a few to not many, if that makes any sense.
First time I saw a 6 Plus in person was this weekend when I went into the Apple store to look at the 5K iMac. And I've seen lots of 6s in person from, coworkers and people walking around, but had never sin a 6 Plus before.
There you go. Science from Accidental Tech Podcast.
All right.
Yeah. Anyway, so the bottom line, we still have no idea. And and I'm still curious to know. Maybe Apple will tell us. Who knows? Someday.
We are also sponsored by Mandrill. Mandrill is from the wonderful people at MailChimp. Mandrill is a scalable, reliable, and secure email infrastructure service trusted by more than 300,000 customers. It's easy to set up, easy to integrate with existing apps, and it's really, really fast. With servers all over the world, Mandrill can deliver your email in milliseconds. They have detailed delivery reports, advanced analytics, even a friendly interface, so your entire team, from developers to marketers, can easily monitor and evaluate your email performance. This started out from MailChimp as kind of a skunkworks project, and they turned this into a crazy good product that outperforms competing services. It's now the largest email as a service platform. They didn't advertise, or they didn't abbreviate email as a service. Like, I know I've seen like a lot of something AAS. I guess this would be like EAS, which wouldn't be very good. So maybe that's why they didn't abbreviate it. Anyway, it's email as a service. It's great. So what Mandrill is, you can send automated one-to-one email, like things like password resets, login messages, welcome messages, as well as marketing emails and customized newsletters. Mandrill is quick to set up, easy to use, and ridiculously stable. This is made for developers, not the general public. This is made for developers to use who love documentation, integrations, high delivery rates, webhooks, and analytics. It comes with a beautiful interface, flexible template options, custom tagging, and advanced tracking and reports. It is the only email infrastructure service, with a mobile app that lets you monitor delivery and troubleshoot from wherever you are. Mandrill is powerful, scalable, and affordable. Now, they're offering us a special deal. Sign up at mandrill.com. That's MANDRILL, mandrill.com, with promo code accidentaltech, one word, and you'll receive 50,000 free emails sent per month for your first 6 months of service. Once again, go to mandrill.com, MANDRILL.com, promo code accidentaltech, and you'll get 50,000 free email sends per month for your first 6 months of service. So thanks a lot to Mandrill. It's a great email infrastructure service from the people at MailChimp.
So, Marco, you recently released an update to Overcast, and I'd like to hear about that. But most specifically, I'd like to hear about this CarPlay thing that apparently you've added.
Yes, I added CarPlay.
All right, moving on. So, Microsoft, So, how did that come to be? Because my understanding of CarPlay is that's not the sort of thing that you can just decide you want to be a part of. So, how did that happen? What are you willing to share?
Well, I started asking people at Apple, how do I become a CarPlay app? And over time, I eventually got to the right person and got through the process.
That was a much less exciting story than I hoped.
It was a pretty unexciting process, to be honest. I mean, like, I'm not sure if I can really reveal the details, but they're not that exciting. Like, I asked around for a long time and eventually got in. That's the story. That's it.
So how did you posted a picture of the little like car screen thingy that you have hooked up to a converter so you can feed it 12 volts DC. What is that? Why did you buy it? Was it a recommended thing? Did it come as part of the program? All that stuff.
It is exactly as boring of a story as you would imagine. I wanted to test on real CarPlay hardware before I released it, so I went to Best Buy and bought the cheapest car radio that supported CarPlay, and I bought a cheap 12-volt power supply on Amazon for $20, and I brought it home, plugged it in, and tested it.
Does your car support CarPlay? Did any of your cars support it?
No.
Oh, so you couldn't actually use the car. It wasn't just a matter of you didn't want to be sitting in a garage with your car or whatever. You wanted to have it on your desk, but you don't even have anything that can use. So this is a feature you're not even going to use yourself. The only place you're ever going to use it is on your desk in front of this little screen.
Correct. I did it because the effort to reward ratio I thought was worth it. It was very low effort. It was a lot of asking, but that's like you send an email every few months. I mean, it wasn't that big of a problem. But then the actual implementation of it is very, very simple because CarPlay apps are limited. The APIs that you use as a CarPlay app are public. You can go see them right now. It's the MP Playable Content Manager, I think. That's the CarPlay API for third-party audio apps. So, and the Apple program simply gets you approved to use that and to be integrated properly with the CarPlay receivers, like to appear on their home screen and everything. The interface that your app has to CarPlay is very, very simple. If you look at the MP content or MP Playable Content Manager thing, that's it. Like that is, you basically provide a hierarchical menu like the old iPods where you have like items and you click on the item and it says, all right, now you're at this level of the tree and what are the items for this level of the tree? And is this one playable or not? Or does it pop another menu? And that's about it. It's very, very simple. So because of that, it's actually very easy to test. I don't feel that I need to be using this myself full time to really make sure it's working properly. I think it's the kind of thing I can test only occasionally and it works just fine. That's about it. And I don't know how many CarPlay compatible vehicles and head units are out there yet. I have no idea. I'm sure it's not a huge number, but it was relatively easy to do, and for the people who do have it, it matters quite a bit. So, and I was one of the reasons why I kept asking Apple about this is because I was interested from the beginning, but whenever the CarPlay stuff first started becoming available to customers, I think it was like 2 months ago or 3 months ago. So it was fairly recent. But ever since that point, I had people asking me on Twitter almost every day, "Hey, why don't you support CarPlay?" Like the handful of people who have CarPlay radios, apparently a big portion of them used Overcast and were very upset that I wasn't supported properly on there yet. So it matters a lot to a small number of people, and it was very easy to do. So that's why I did it.
So I've forgotten so much about CarPlay. Does it require you to connect with a wire still, or can you do a wireless thing?
I believe it's wired only. I mean, the radio, I honestly, I don't know that much about it. The radio I got, which is the Pioneer App Radio 4, which is it's called the App Radio 4 in so many places except the box or any part of the Pioneer website, where it's called the SPH-DA120. This is great consumer electronics stuff. People keep asking me if I recommend that one. The answer is I have no idea. I've literally only used it for this purpose. I find most third-party car radios to be pretty tacky and kind of overly happy with things like blue LEDs and ugly menus, and this is no exception. So I'm just not a good person to ask about that. So I have no idea. And because I'm not using it in a car, I can't tell you about things like the utility of the other functions.
And so does it have a USB connector, and you're just connecting an Apple like USB Lightning thing in it, and that's all there is to it?
That's exactly it.
All right. And for the CarPlay thing, could you have basically implemented all this functionality before getting approval from Apple? And is the thing you got from Apple simply permission to upload an app to the App Store that they won't reject because it uses the CarPlay APIs?
Yes, and I did. In fact, I wrote this code months ago when the CarPlay API. In fact, this code was in Overcast 1.0. It just was inactive. Because at the time when the AMP Playable Content Manager API first came out, CarPlay wasn't, I don't think it was officially announced, or it was announced at the same event, but the documentation of that, where it now says this is for CarPlay, didn't explain it. It just said this is for certain types of AV components and receivers and everything. So I thought, I wonder if there are like a special made for iPod receiver where if there's a home theater receiver that can display this hierarchical menu I'm creating. So I thought there was going to be something else out there besides CarPlay that could show this, maybe in homes or whatever. So I thought maybe I should get in on that and make sure that I work properly on those things. So I wrote all this code months ago and had no way to test it because I had no hardware that would actually interact with it, and nothing. I couldn't find any information on it. So I basically commented it out. I just didn't instantiate the class that manages this in my code in versions 1.0 through 1.04.
Well, okay. I really thought there was going to be a lot more drama there.
Do you think you would think that if Apple was really interested in getting why would it be this process that takes you months? Because of don't you think it would be just as easy to join the CarPlay thing as it is to upload an app to the App Store? The App Store is successful because hey, anybody with a couple bucks can sign up as a developer, write an app with our free tools, and upload it, and now you're on the App Store, and there you go. Whereas CarPlay seems like a much harder system to get into, and it doesn't make any sense if Apple is interested in CarPlay becoming a thing. But maybe they're not. Maybe this is the version 1.0 and they're not that interested in getting too many people to fiddle with it. I don't know.
The problem with car stuff is there's major concerns with safety and driver distraction. And secondarily, there's also a lot of laws, and the laws vary in different countries and sometimes even different states. The laws vary on what kind of interaction is legal to provide to a driver while the car's in motion, whether animations, any kind of moving content is permitted or not permitted in certain contexts in certain places. There's so many regulations for and just simply concerns for safety because it's this is pretty serious stuff. You don't want to have somebody simulating Angry Birds in the dashboard display by changing the item artwork every half second or whatever. There's all these crazy ways that these kind of systems could be abused. Certainly App Review could probably catch a lot of that, but I don't know how much App Review is testing CarPlay. I can understand if Apple wants to be cautious. Like I can understand why this might not be open to everybody.
I don't know. So still seems kind of weird to me. Like you said, that's the whole point of app review. And if they're not, if app review is the bottleneck, like, I mean, what's the point of, if this is a thing that they want to happen, they should be paying more money for more people to review more carefully. Like, there are medical applications in the App Store. Somehow that seems okay, but I don't know. It's not a formula for success. If Apple really says, like, if CarPlay had to make a strategy statement and it was like CarPlay in every car in the world by 10 years from now or whatever, like, that's obviously not what they're going for. It just seems like it seems like a hobby, like Apple TV used to be. Like, we have a car solution. It's a thing since Ferraris, I guess, and also Hondas maybe, but we're not that into it, because there is, like you said, there is that sort of adversarial, sort of standoffish relationship with the car makers themselves, trying to sort out how are we going to arrive at car interiors that aren't terrible, and as we discussed at length on Neutral.
Right. Well, and also, like, similar to, like, all the concerns that Apple or app makers should have about liability and safety problems, the car makers have their own concerns too. Like, if you're driving a BMW using Angry Birds simulated in CarPlay artwork and you crash, so many people are upset about that. And it's so many people's problem. It's obviously it's your problem in a lot of ways. Your family might have to deal with things. But it's Apple's problem. It's the app's problem. It's BMW's problem. Like, the bad PR and lawsuits and everything can fly in all those different directions. Everyone has to really cover their own butts here. And I really can't blame anybody in this situation for being overly cautious, because it is something that should be taken seriously.
Yeah, but so many of these things are covered over by, like, the screens that come up when I start my car that are like, press OK to agree that you shouldn't look at this screen when you're driving. And if you do, if the screen goes away on its own, so you don't actually have to press OK. But, like, the little, like, one screen EULA type thing where it's meaningless. Nobody reads it. It just becomes a constant annoyance. This is actually one of the things that makes one of the many things that makes the electronics in cars annoying, like the ass covering messages that you're just going to see for the entire life of the car that will have no effect on how you use the car, and probably no effect legally speaking, because it's not like it absolves anybody from, anyway, it's stupid. I don't like it.
Yeah, my car shows me a license agreement every time I start it.
That's so bad.
Press agree to drive.
Yeah. Anyway, in better news, we are also sponsored this week once again by our friends at Hover. Not Hover, not Hoover, not Hover.
Hover.
It's our friends at Hover. Hoover something else. This is Hover. Hover is the best way to buy and manage domain names. Go to hover.com and use the offer code Casey Needs an App.
Yes, he does.
So go to hover.com, use offer code Casey Needs a Nap for 10% off your first purchase at Hover. Hover is a domain registrar that doesn't suck. You have a great idea, you want a secure domain name for it, you want something catchy and memorable to represent your project or idea or yourself or your store or your art or your jokes, like CaseyNeeds.coffee, whatever it is, Hover gives you exactly what you need to get the job done. You can find the perfect domain and then get started on the rest of the idea. Like, I don't know about you guys. When I have a new idea for a project, if I don't have a name and if I don't have the domain name bought, like, I can't start working on it. Like, it blocks me from working on it. I know it sounds stupid, but, like, the name of a project is very important to me, and I always think of that first, and I try to get that nailed down first. If you are like that, Hover is your friend. If you are not like that, Hover will be your friend later. But regardless, Hover will be your friend at some point. Hover is designed by, developers, people like us. It's made for people who want no BS. But it's also very friendly for people who aren't like us. They have this amazing support. They have telephone support even. You can call them up and talk to a real-life person immediately. There's this awesome no-hold, no-wait, no-transfer phone support policy. And even, just the regular stuff, they do it extremely well. Their site is very nicely designed, easy to use. Their pricing is really competitive and extremely fair. It comes with a whole bunch of stuff for free, like domain privacy. There's no extra charge for anything like that. And people, there's a reason why we all love Hover, why we all use Hover. Besides the fact that they pay us to say all this, they're also just really good. Anyway, Hover gives you easy-to-use, powerful tools to manage your domain name Go to hover.com to learn more about this. If you need a domain name, just go there next. They have great search. They have like those like word generation algorithms. So like if what you search for is not available anywhere, then they'll suggest different rewordings of it or synonyms or modifications that are available. It's pretty good. So and honestly, I've seen a lot of registrars attempt those kind of word tricks. Hover, I think, does it best. And I'm honestly saying, like, I have tried this before on other sites. Hover's weird word trick thing works better than the other ones I've tried. Go to hover.com, hover.com, in case you are British and don't understand what I'm saying. Hover.com, use offer code Casey Needs an App to get 10% off your first purchase. Thank you very much to Hover for sponsoring our show.
All right. So today was somewhat unexpectedly, or at least for me, big day in my world because Microsoft has open sourced or is said they're going to open source a considerable portion of .NET. And not only open source it, but bring it to be cross-platform. And this is, to me, a pretty darn big deal. And it's probably not going to change my day-to-day life very much, but it's a very interesting statement from a company that very much didn't believe that there were platforms other than Windows. And so what they did today is they said they're going to open source a few additional components of .NET. And the best write-up I found in the few minutes I had to look at this was by Miguel de Icaza. I hope I pronounced that right. He is the head and I believe founder of the Mono project, which is a project to take .NET and make it cross-platform. And what they were doing was, what's the term for when you don't look at any sort of source and you don't reverse compile or anything like that? You just
clean room, reverse engineer, clean room, whatever.
Thank you, sir. So they were doing a clean room version of .NET. And then over time, as Microsoft has open sourced little bits here and there, they would incorporate those as licensing would permit. Well, we'll put a link to Miguel's post in the show notes, but basically he breaks it down, and there are three things that are being open sourced: .NET Framework Libraries, .NET Core Framework Libraries, and the Ryujit, which sounds like Hadouken to me, but anyway, VM. And so the Framework Class Libraries is basically, so if you think of .NET as both a series of languages and then the class library that these languages sit on top of, or I guess maybe vice versa, for them to release the .NET Framework classes, that's a really big damn deal. And so if you want to see how all of .NET, all of the foundational stuff in .NET is implemented, you can go and check it out. And so that they're open sourcing .NET Framework Class Libraries, .NET Core, which, as Miguel says, the .NET Core is a redesigned version of .NET that is based on the simplified version of the class libraries, as well as a design that allows for .NET to be incorporated into applications. And this should sound a lot like, and I'm going to get is it Clang or LLVM that's leveraged within Xcode, not just for compilation, but for just-in-time stuff?
It's not quite. I think it's just the underlying libraries that power both the Clang compiler and Xcode. I don't know what you call this library. Someone probably knows.
That's right. The point is, you can build, tools that leverage the compiler, not on like an IDE, for example. So anyway, so all this stuff is going to show up on GitHub. I was poking around GitHub earlier tonight, and not all of it's there yet, but it's certainly going to arrive there. And there's also a good post, the official Microsoft blog post about all of this. And it talks about, or it's kind of almost an FAQ, why do we open source .NET Core? Why are we doing it on GitHub? And one of the things they said was, and this is from the blog post, as a principle, we don't want to ask the community to come to where we are. Instead, we want to go to where the community already is. And so they're going to GitHub. All this stuff is going to show up. And it's funny because on the one side, for my day-to-day, like I said earlier, I don't think it's really going to change a darn thing, except maybe I could use .NET on OS 10 without using Mono. But I mean, whatever. I don't really know why I would want to do that. But I think it indicates a pretty big shift in Microsoft away from the Windows is everything and there's nothing else in the world mentality. And that's what I think I'm most amped up about.
So what does this make possible that wasn't possible before? Because Mono was already cross-platform.
Sure.
So anything that, if you could say, well, now I can use, C# and .NET to write applications that run on platforms other than Windows. You already kind of could with Mono. What can I don't quite other than for all those things that Mono had to, Xamarin had to clean room, reverse engineer, and re-implement that now they don't have to anymore. They can just take the actual source and incorporate it. But does this make anything new possible that wasn't possible before, or feasible like it was possible before, but you'd be worried about how supported it was, and now Microsoft said it's going to be officially supported?
That, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's that it's no longer third party; it's now first party. And to go back to Miguel's blog post, and I'm quoting now, we have a project underway that. Actually, let me back up. I'm sorry. Mono will be able to use as much as it wants from this project. We have a project underway that already does this. We are replacing chunks of Mono code that was either incomplete, buggy, or not as fully featured as it should be with Microsoft's code. So it certainly will improve Mono's robustness, reliability, decrease in bugs, etc. But on the surface, I agree with you, John, that it doesn't really necessarily enable anything that wasn't there already. The only thing I can think of that might be a bit different is I haven't looked closely at Mono or Xamarin in a long time, but if you wanted to hypothetically run an ASP.NET website on something other than IIS, I would assume that as part of this open sourcing of, among other things, ASP.NET, you could do that on top of like Apache or something like that without necessarily having to leverage Mono. I think Mono has done this at least in part in the past, but certainly it should be easier now, or well, in the future.
Yeah, that was my next question, because like not included in this, if I'm reading it correctly, is any of the sort of the GUI libraries that you use to make applications for Windows.
Right. Windows Forms, I've not seen any mention of. And so I believe you are correct.
So this is all kind of faceless server-side stuff. And then for the server-side stuff, it's like, well, sorry. So I can, ASP.NET is here. If I can build I don't even know what you build for ASP.NET, but like, I know what the API looks like, but I don't understand the deployment outside of IIS. Do you just build like a library that gets loaded? I have no idea. I've never done anything involving .NET inside Apache.
Well, that's the thing, and I'm not sure either. But the theory is that there's nothing stopping you from writing some sort of glue between Apache and the ASP.NET DLLs or whatever output that comes from that.
Yeah, Horatio Boston in the chat room says that one new thing that's possible is that you could use Visual Studio to build something that doesn't run on Windows. You could build an executable that runs on OS X. And that's the thing with this kind of like, if you want to use Xcode, you have to use a Mac. Well, if you want to, I think this is still the case for all these open source components. Like, can you use anything other than Visual Studio or the Xamarin stuff to build this? Like, is there like a Mac command line thing where you could just run, like, there's got to be, I guess, right?
Well, I don't think there is, but they're open sourcing, I believe they're open sourcing Roslyn, which is their compiler stack.
Yeah, they already did that, but I was wondering if, like, practically speaking, does that mean that you can get a command prompt and a bunch of files and start compiling source code on your Mac that runs on your Mac? Or do you need Windows? Do you need Visual Studio? Because Visual Studio is the IDE, and that's what you need to compile this stuff. I don't know how far people have gone in taking the open source compiler and trying to make it like so that you could actually do development of faceless non-GUI applications on the .NET stack using only a Mac and not having a Windows machine anywhere.
Right. I understand the question. And as far as I know, the only Mac native compiler binary that exists is Mono's compiler. But I mean, you've got the entire source of Roslyn. So in principle, you could, although it is self-hosted. So yeah, I guess that is a little weird. I don't know how that would work, but I'm sure someone is or has done it. I don't know. But this is interesting. It's certainly an interesting move. It's something that I didn't expect from Microsoft, even though this has sort of been going on for a while now. It took me a little bit by surprise that this much was going to get open source this quickly. And the only somewhat crummy thing about it, which I understand, but they said publicly in one of these posts that this isn't about for a lot of the projects that they're open sourcing, this isn't about asking for pull requests and making a true community project. It was more just saying, hey, if you want to fork it, here it is, but we're going to continue forward in our own way. And that's the way it's going to be.
I think this is heartening in the same way that Apple's recent sort of opening up and doing things that previously they seemed not interested in doing, even, extensions or third-party keyboards or whatever in iOS. This is another thing that people have always wanted Microsoft to do, like take the core part of your stack and make it open source for the same reasons that kind of for the same reasons that Apple has open sourced the core part of its OS and everything, although hopefully with better results. And that like the lower level stuff, there's not much competitive advantage to keeping that closed source, and there's a lot of advantage to people developing on your platform and to you as a platform maker to make it open source. Even if you don't get that much benefit of other people, every little bit helps, and it just makes it feel like it's a development environment where you can see what's going on. The fewer black boxes, the better. Like if you're debugging something, it would be nice to be able to have the source code to all the stuff that you're debugging. Obviously, that's not the case on the Mac. It never has been. It's not the case in iOS. There's some parts of it that are open source, but then eventually you get into Cocoa and UIKit and AppKit and all that stuff. And that's not open source, and I bet that would be great if that was open source too. But like, so you have to balance, or at least these companies think they have to balance what source do we keep closed and what source do we open up, because there's no advantage just to keeping it closed. And Microsoft, I'm not surprised to see this, because it seems like Microsoft has long since realized that keeping this stuff, like as people stop paying attention to you, as you are no longer the big dog in the market, and you're not like, oh, Microsoft, they rule the entire PC industry. Like they don't anymore. Like mobile is more important. Microsoft does not own mobile. If you continue to act like you are the most important company and you're never going to show your crown jewels, it's making you less and less relevant. If you want to bring people back to your camp, you have to be more open. It's not a power play. It's more of a realization of the new shape of the market. And I think it's helpful. Like you're saying, how will this affect your job? Maybe you'll come across something where you have some bug and you can't figure out what's going on, and it'll be useful to be able to step through in the debugger a bunch of bottom level .NET code, stepping through the source. Maybe you could have already done that anyway, because the source was already available, but it wasn't available in a way that was open source that could be integrated. So
correct.
I don't know. I mean, Microsoft is just hoping that people will build on this and it will become a foundation for lots of other projects. I mean, the best thing that could happen to them is someone finally takes this core stuff and builds some great new thing on top of it, because they can and they couldn't before. Like they didn't want to have to deal with that stuff. That we need a language runtime, and we need a good compiler, and we want to be able to do our development in a nice IDE, and we're going to use that as a jumping off point to build some bigger, better thing. But I don't know what the odds of that happening are, but they're non-zero now, I guess.
So just for grins and giggles, let's say that Swift is not a thing. It's not even in progress. Would Apple have used C# and or .NET to become what is now Swift? I think the answer is absolutely not, because they want total control. But let's assume that.
Well, they could have total control with this, couldn't they? Isn't it?
I think there's going to be pieces that are missing, in the same way that what is it that is it Darwin is the open source project, but Mach, or am I getting that backwards? You know what I'm thinking of, where you could build most of OS 10.
Well, they just like the closed source drivers and everything, like things for ATI that has proprietary code. There's a bunch of like legal stuff. It's not like they're hiding that stuff. It's just that anything that involves code that is owned by companies other than Apple, like, you know, video card makers, or even like there's a bunch of drivers that aren't open source. You can't build a Yosemite kernel from the open source, because it's just stuff that's not included in there. But for ownership, like KHTML was not owned by Apple, but they took it, forked it, and ran with it. WebKit is owned by Apple. You know what I mean? So they could, but I think that Apple would not adopt this open source or not, just because knowing enough about the people involved in the process, this is not what they want. And so it's not so much that, we would have taken .NET if only it was open source. Swift is a different direction, right? Swift is not a common language runtime. It is not garbage collection. It is, it is so many things that it's not. So for that reason alone, they wouldn't take it. But if the current set of people who make these decisions at Apple did not work at Apple, but a different set of people who did, this would have changed the math on, can we adopt .NET? Suddenly it will become a lot more viable.
Yep. And okay, so I agree with you completely there. Now, what is his name? Andy Rubin is just creating Android today. Android does not exist yet. Does he still use, don't call it Java?
They picked something that was not owned by them. That was at that time, sort of invented by Sun, and like they're in a legal fight with Oracle over the copywriting APIs, and even though they're using a different VM that they wrote themselves, like the thing that they did end up picking, Java, was not a clean. They didn't make a clean getaway with that, legally speaking. So I don't see how .NET is any worse.
Their official strategy was just steal it. We'll worry about it later.
Yeah, I mean, well, is it stealing? Like, because it gets into the whole, can you copyright an API? Because they did.
Excuse me. Just rip it off. We'll worry about it later.
It's kind of like a clean room re-implementation. Because like we know, like there's a public spec out there. We're going to make our own VM. I'm assuming they didn't use any source code from any of the Java virtual machines. It is their own thing that does things in a different way. It's all just of like, oh well, you implemented this all yourself and you wrote all your own source code, but the API, the functions, the parameters, all that's copyrighted. And so they basically did a clean re-implementation of Java. I don't know what the details are of like, you can argue about what things got used where, but I don't like the idea of an API being a published API being copyrighted. So I'm not going to blame Google for doing this, but practically speaking though, I don't see how .NET, the current open source .NET, could possibly be any worse than the situation they're currently in with Java. So, and I think it would be a better choice for them than Java because they would have to do less work. Like they could take the virtual machine and everything free and clear. Like it's an open source license. It's not like they have to re-implement it, right?
Right.
So, and I also like C# better than Java. So there's that.
Yep. Well, and that's the thing is that C#. I've talked in the past to a handful of people about how C# really is good, and most worldly developers in the Apple community at least appreciate it, if not agree with me. But there's certainly some that are like, oh God, it's Microsoft, I can't stand it. No. And C# really is a really, really great, really robust language. And it's, even though it tries to be in many ways all things to all people, it actually does a pretty darn good job of it all in all. And it's moving forward, but not at a breakneck pace. So it's moving forward in a way that's sustainable. There's not bugs everywhere, at least in any of the things that I touch in my day-to-day life. It's a really robust language. And as much as I don't have that much love for Microsoft, I really do love C#. And if I were to just flip a switch and become a full-time Objective-C or Swift developer tomorrow, there's certainly things about C# that I would miss. And there's a lot that I really think they got right. And so I'm very curious to see, does this change how C# is treated? Not from a like, oh, it's good or oh, it's bad, but like you were saying earlier, John, is someone going to take C# and really run with it in the future? Or, I mean, strictly speaking, I guess you could do that with VB as well. I mean, .NET is more than just C#, but I don't know. It's just, I'm curious to see what this brings.
I think it's unlikely because C# is kind of like this. The reason C# is, I think, nicer than Java is because it got to learn the lessons of Java.
Sure.
Right. So someone went first, made a bunch of mistakes. C# didn't make those same mistakes. And I think C# has been developed steadily with a little bit more singular vision, let's say, instead of the sort of committee design of Java. It seems to be lurching forward and not quite as confident a way. But at this point, both of those languages are of a vintage that people like. I'm not going to say people are more likely to build something in Swift if Swift was suddenly open source, but the kinds of projects that get built, like the kind of application it seems like the CLR is most appropriate for is, I would guess, server-side stuff and like GUI client-side stuff. But like I can't imagine the next WebKit killer being implemented in C# on top of .NET, right? But just because it seems like there's still this thing, and we can't quite get away from it, of like, you're either going to use C, C++, or one of these new breed of languages like Swift that aims to be as fast as them, but gives you these high-level conveniences. Where as soon as you go up into something with garbage collection, like server-side is totally okay with it, which is weird because server-side is like the performance is so demanding there in terms of, a specific performance profile is demanding there. Not quite the same thing as a GUI application, but I'm thinking of Linux, like the open source people. I don't see them latching on to C# as their language. I mean, they're the people who were going crazy with Qt and everything. So they still seem to be stuck in sort of a lower level mindset. So I'm not sure. Maybe we need one more generation of people to wake up and say, I'm going to write a new great thing, and I'm not going to do it in C++ or C. Why don't I just use C#? It's like, we need the infrastructure to be there first. We need like every Linux distribution to come, not just with Mono, but with like a more officially supported, like Microsoft blessed stack that's in sync with Microsoft's code releases, to be able to use C# as your development language.
See, I don't know. I think a lot of the reason that the Linux community hasn't embraced like Mono, for example, is because there's such a bunch of neckbeards that love C and C++ so damn much. And granted, I haven't been a participant in the Linux community in 7-8 years, something like that. But at the time, it seemed like it was it was all about having a barrier of entry. And if you weren't like a god at C or C++, then you know what, you're not good enough to be in our Cool Kid Club. And last I heard, that hasn't really changed. But again, I haven't paid attention in almost a decade.
Yeah, I don't know. Open source is difficult because whenever I think of open source stuff, I don't think of the GUI stuff, even though there have been GUI things based on every language you could possibly imagine, all the way up to and including like Tickle or whatever, right? You know, it's not as if people aren't doing it. It's just not one unified face. Hell, there was what was the OpenStep port? What the hell was that called?
I don't know.
Anyway, someone ages ago, GNU Step, there you go, ported the OpenStep APIs, and that's like basically what if AppKit was available for Linux? Boy, that would change things. Well, AppKit was practically available for Linux for a long time, but you know it wasn't officially sanctioned. It was a small group of people making it, and it's not like people are clamoring to make apps like that. So the most important things to come out of sort of the Linux open source community are things like KHTML and earlier Apache and stuff like that, like faceless applications written in low level languages. Those are okay, but as soon as you get into anything GUI, it's like just don't look to the Linux community for anything. Or file systems, another example. Coming from ZFS, coming from Sun, BTRFS, those things tend to come out of the open source world. And so if .NET and C# want to help in that regard, they can give some new tools to that crowd. But it's not. You don't see anything coming out of there that's like anything higher level than that. Can you think of like an exciting thing that is not faceless that has come out of the open source / Linux community in the last decade or so that has made an impact on the wider world of computing?
Wireshark, Audacity, both nerdy tools.
Adium, also a nerdy tool.
Someone said Git. That's faceless.
Yeah, Git needs a million front ends on it to make it usable.
Yeah, and Git is not only back end and faceless, but it's just gross.
Like even the Git commands that you use in the command line are themselves front ends to like 5 other commands under the hood that are actually doing the thing you want to do.
Yeah, Git is not a great example of user interface, even in a faceless application.
Git is exactly what you would expect from the creator of Linux making something complicated. Like version control and distributed version control are already very complicated problems. Add to that the creator of Linux making the one that he wants to use, and Git is exactly what you'd expect that to be.
Well, here's an example. Selenium. Someone just suggested Selenium. That's still kind of server related. Either one of you guys use Selenium? I guess there's like a lot of tools that are either web-based or have to do with testing things that have to do with the web that probably count, maybe. I don't know.
PHPBB?
No.
Wow. Of course,
a
you would
lot
pipe
of regular
up with that.
people have interacted with that.
I mean, Xamarin has had more of an impact because they let you write iOS apps, right? Like that whole strategy of you can use this other stack to write things. There's cross-platform, right? You sort of shared core of an application and you deploy on iOS and also on other platforms.
Yeah, that's right. I looked at Xamarin back when it was Mono 1 or Mono Touch 1, excuse me. And at the time anyway, it was exactly what I would have done if I was trying to write a cross-platform setup for iOS, insofar as basically they just wrote glue classes where if you had, I don't know, UI activity view controller, whatever it is, in Objective-C, you're going to have the exact same thing in C# with basically the same API, just things translated to be a little more friendly to the C# world. And the C# classes were just really heavily annotated with attributes and whatnots to describe what is supposed to happen. And so what that meant was, and this is true, I believe, of Monodroid or whatever it's called, Xamarin for Android now. And so basically what that means is, if you're going to write a cross-platform app, you would presumably have the same business logic across both iOS and Android, and those would be the exact same classes, completely shared, etc. But you would be pretty much compelled to have a user interface specific for each platform. This is in contrast to something like a PhoneGap, which is all JavaScript based, and they try to make the user interface code generic amongst both platforms as well. And PhoneGap does a reasonably good job given what it is. So, for example, when you ask for, I think it's, maybe I'm thinking of Titanium actually. It doesn't matter. One of the JavaScript ones. When you ask for tab bar, you'll get a UI tab bar in iOS, and it'll be at the bottom. And if you ask for a tab bar in Android, you'll get whatever the Android equivalent is, and it'll be on the top. But it's still trying to be all things to all people, whereas Xamarin, at the time anyway, was not that way. And you would have to definitely write separate user interfaces per platform.
But you would share all your core logic and your sort of your business objects and everything like that. So I think that C# already probably has done more to bring, or Xamarin and Monotensionals have done more to bring Microsoft's tools to the wider GUI community than probably the accumulated mass of every GUI effort that has come out of the Linux world.
Yeah. Anyway, it's just interesting. I'm very curious to see where it goes. To be honest, like I said, I don't know that it'll affect much unless somebody, like John had said, embraces this to make some wonderful new thing. But I don't know. I was somewhat surprised to see it, and I'm excited to see what comes of it. Now, before we move on, out of curiosity, what do you guys use at work or in retirement for you, Marco? What do you use for version control, if not Git?
Oh, I use Git for the same reason that a lot of people use Git, which is that GitHub's really good, and that if I want to use a lot of open source anything, like if I want to open source a library, if I want to open source something, generally speaking, you need it is wise if you want to have any contributions or any interaction with other developers. It is wise to use GitHub, and therefore I use Git. I don't know. There's a lot of areas in my life where I kind of pick like the alternative team, and for whatever reason, I didn't do that this time because there's a lot of downsides to that approach. A lot of times, like when I bought the DVD plus RW drive, that was dumb. But so many things that I've done.
As long as you didn't have DVD RAM, then you're fine.
I did not have DVD RAM. I don't know why there's a DVD RAM emoji. DVD RAM was never popular. It's not like it was just outdated. Like it was never ever popular among anybody. But regardless, I did not buy. I was tempted to buy a DVD RAM because it's so much better for data integrity. It actually is way better in so many ways for integrity. But I resisted it and instead bought DVD plus RW back before there were combo drives, which was very stupid. But anyway, this time I didn't go for the alternative team. I went for the big team, and I just said, let's root for the Yankees, and it'll be easier. And hey, I made a sports metaphor.
I was about to say,
Git is not the Yankees, please.
Is that up to date, or is that outdated information?
No, Git was never the Yankees.
So what do you use at work, John?
Oh, like it's not you have a choice at work. I use Perforce at work, and for the centralized version, non-distributed version control system, so not Mercurial, not Git, not BitLocker, like the old school style, sort of the CVS subversion style, I like Perforce better than any of these other centralized ones I've used. But
yep, completely agree.
It has many things not to recommend it. And it so wants to, so the decentralized ones come on the scene, and they all work according to a paradigm that is totally foreign to Perforce, right? And so it can't change its stripes. It can't be like, now I'm decentralized. It's just not. It's like everything about it, it's baked in to the design of Perforce. It's never going to be like Git or Mercurial or something. But it feels the need to add weird sort of half-hearted marketing features like the P4 shell feature that showed up a few years ago. And it's like, just don't even try. Like, that's not... I don't know. So Perforce does bother me every time I think about how much easier this would be on one of the more modern version control systems. But if I just go backwards into the old mindset, it's my favorite of an old outdated lot.
Yeah, I used Perforce at my very first job, and this was 2004, and at the time I really liked it, but obviously the world has moved on, like you said. So what if you were to do a personal project right now, or if work asked you, hey, John, what would you like to use? And the whole company will use that. What would you recommend?
I would use Git, but I would hold my nose the whole time. Like one person in the chat room apparently has never heard people say that the Git is gross. Git is totally gross, not in the functionality that it has, but in the user interface. And yes, command line programs have a user interface, and Git's user interface, when you design any program, the user interface is you have to build sort of the user model of how this program works, right? You've got the model of how the internal guts of the program work, and you have to provide a user model and a set of vocabulary and a series of nouns and verbs that expose the functionality that you've made possible with your application in a friendly way, and Git totally fails in that. Just totally fails. The words they pick for everything, the options they use to represent those words, the whole big structure of the Git subcommands and the flags and how they go to it and the different, it's just terrible. I mean, there's a million web pages about it. It is a total user interface failure. But that's the functionality is great, and it's free, and it's open source, and GitHub exists. So there are many other things to recommend, and it comes out ahead in net, but that doesn't mean it's not gross. I mean, ugh.
Now, have you played with Mercurial, which I cannot pronounce apparently? Because was it Daniel Jalkut that was on a tirade about that?
Yeah, Jalkut's still rocking the Mercurial. I think like he made the more elegant choice, but it's just like it's swimming against the tide, right? Because everything, like so much infrastructure and is built around Git, and people just expect you to use it. And it's like if Mercurial had won. It's like, if Betamax had won instead of VHS, but bottom line is, VHS won, and so here we are. That's a better analogy than the Yankees, I think.
Here it is, Marco. You tried that one time, and this is what you get for it.
I'll never try again.
Yeah, in the chat room, someone whose name I'm not going to try to pronounce says that Mercurial is basically Git with fewer features, a better UI, and a slower implementation. Speed is actually a concern. Speaking of, operations in Git, and someone from the chat room will correct me within 30 seconds as soon as they hear this if I'm wrong, scale linearly with the number of files, which is fine if you have a small repository. At work, we have a ridiculous, gigantic repository that is way too big, and Perforce is actually faster than Git for doing common operations. So that's not a slam against Git. That's a slam against how we manage our code. But that is something to consider. And that's another reason, Mercurial is not a clean win over Git. It may have a nicer interface and a more well thought out sort of way that it describes its functionality, but Git has a lot of developer time behind it, and Git has a lot of features and can do a lot of amazing things. And the tools and the ecosystem built around Git make it more valuable than Mercurial.
Cool.
On that bombshell, thanks a lot to our 3 sponsors this week, Mandrill, Squarespace, and Hover, and we will see you next week.
Now the show is over, they didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research, Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Twitter, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
Because of the agreement that you have with Analog. First of all, how is your baby monitor doing?
What is this agreement? I'm not caught up on Analog, even though I heard a recent one live.
Basically, Mike had said, mostly jokingly, that he is going to... actually, I don't think we've released this one yet. This might be the one...
Well, he is proposing some kind of agreement between the two shows that most of the feelings will go on their show because most of the tech is going to go on our show.
Denied. Yeah, I think I remember here. Now this is ringing a bell. That's total bogus. Just reject this offer immediately. Furthermore, declare war against that podcast.
Oh, God, that's awesome. No, the baby monitor is good. We basically have the same baby monitor that you have.
Yeah.
But no, baby's good. Every day is a little different, but in ways I can't describe, which is the oddest thing. He looks a little bit different, kind of acts a little bit different. And again, I wish I could tell you a specific way in which that's the case, but every day it's just a little bit different when you're that young. I mean, he's 2 weeks today, actually. It's just everything is expected in some ways to be different. Like today we noticed, actually, here's an empirical example or a specific example. We noticed that I think he's starting to be able to cry as in generate tears. Obviously he, wails and moans on occasion, sometimes often, but I don't think he was able to generate tears until tonight. We saw, wait. I think that's a tear. I think that's a tear, so, that's new, but I mean, all in all, everything's fine. Still sleeping more than expected, less than desired, but it's all good.
So, or as some general advice, things change quickly, and like he in 6 months he's going to look completely different.
Oh yeah.
6 months after that he'll look completely different again. And he'll of course he'll act different. He'll get more abilities. What I would recommend is you probably already do this, but like don't forget to take pictures and don't forget to take video. I would suggest leaving your camera out, like leave it like on the coffee table or somewhere like on a kitchen counter, like leave it out so that taking a picture of him doesn't require setup. Like you can always just grab the camera and take a picture. So, make it very casual. Make it like an everyday easy thing to do. If you and don't forget to take videos. Whether it's just iPhone videos or fancy camera videos is fine. It matters less for video with like the technical quality of it. But video, it really captures time and captures a moment in a way that a lot of photos, they can, but video just captures a whole other dimension of it. And so don't go like 6 months without taking a video, because what you're going to see is you're going to look back in a year and be like, oh my God, I can't believe he used to look like that. Or I don't even remember that time when he was doing that. Because it does change so quickly especially during this first 2 years.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because a friend of the show _ David Smith actually came down this morning. I had the morning off from work, and so he came down to visit and meet Declan. And I've had our fancy cameras basically sitting on our coffee table just about always. So either Aaron or I can grab it and take a picture. And at one point, he allowed Aaron and I to hold Declan for a moment. And I mean that in a good way, not in a bad way. And so all of a sudden I heard the shutter, going in the background because, Dave's a nice guy and he picked up the camera and started taking a few pictures of the three of us, which that reminds me, I haven't gone back to look, and I'm sure they're gorgeous because he's a really good photographer, but it's because it was just sitting there, and because he knows that I wouldn't mind him doing that. In fact, I appreciated it. He was able to take a few shots of us, and I got to assume that at least one, if not several of those, are going to be really awesome. Especially because it's not often that you have all three of us in one shot, because usually it's either me or Aaron taking the picture. So, I hear you.
Yeah, that was a good move by _
He's the best.
Do you have a picture taking? First of all, are you going to have formal pictures taken on any sort of schedule? And if so, what is that schedule?
I need to know your schedule.
So it depends on how you define formal. We are taking pictures every week.
Like you have a professional photographer take them of all of you, basically.
We haven't really talked about it. We did have professional shots taken when we were at the hospital, which if you'll permit me to go on a rant, I can go on a rant about. But I don't know about other than that. I was thinking, and I haven't talked to Aaron about this yet, maybe like every year we might do it, especially in the beginning, when he's still changing, all the time. I don't necessarily feel like we need to do that every year forevermore, but I don't know, remind me of that after I've done this for 18 years straight. So I don't know.
You should ask Aaron about it because you haven't had this discussion before. She may have a different plan in mind.
Oh, very much so. I mean, who knows, but we'll see. I mean, I'm just happy that we have friends and family around that will take pictures of us with a decent camera, and that we have a decent camera. But obviously there's something to be said for professional shots. And so when we were in the hospital, and this isn't going to make it in the release show because it's stupid, but it pisses me off. When we were in the hospital, the blessed hospital photographer company comes around and says, hey, would you like us to take pictures? And I knew this was coming because a coworker of mine, his wife does it, but for a different company. So I was, yeah, sure, take some pictures. And so they set up Declan, and basically she took the end of Aaron's hospital bed, which had all white sheets, and did some magic where she fluffed the sheets in such a way that it looked like a freaking set, like a photography set, and put Declan in it, and took pictures with Declan on his side and on his back, and then we were holding him, and then there was one that's really adorable where it's just his feet with our wedding rings on it, and so there were only about 10 or 20 shots that we got in the mail because, of course, we paid for them and blah, blah, blah. And the thing that really bothered me was when the woman was in there, the photographer was in there, she was really, really nice and seemed to be very good at what she does. So she was using either a Canon or Nikon DSLR. I don't recall exactly what. Well, I get these pictures in the mail, and among other things, I got a CD with the digital files on it. And these pictures that I got in the mail, the file size of each of these pictures that came off a DSLR that mustn't have been more than a year or two old was 1.5 megs. What?
Yeah, you definitely got, resized JPEGs out of something. Yeah, that's
anything they're selling you in the hospital is always, it's like anything you get inside a theme park.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah. It's so true. And the doubly annoying thing was, just on principle, not because it mattered, but just on principle, not only was the JPEG hyper compressed, I think it was like 2,500 pixels by 1,500 pixels or thereabouts. But
yeah,
right. I mean, you especially, Marco, should know how funny that is. But not only that, they deliberately stripped all the EXIF data. Do I need that EXIF data? No, of course not. But the fact that some way during their whatever workflow, they stripped out the EXIF data, that's just insane to me. And so obviously it's been post-processed in some way. And so I wrote an extraordinarily angry yet mildly polite email to them saying, are you freaking kidding me? You should be giving me raw files for the $150 I paid you. But I would just be happy with the unshitty version of the compressed, the JPEGs off the camera. I would really like a copy of those or my money back. And I got an extremely short email back from them saying,
too bad.
It said, basically, we're shipping you something. Don't throw away you can feel free to throw away the thing you already have when the new thing arrives.
All right.
I don't know if that means that they're sending me a new CD with different files, if they're sending me a CD with the same files. I have no idea, but I'm hopeful that perhaps I will eventually be vindicated and they will send me files that are bigger than 1,500 by 2,500.
Good luck with that.
Oh, I know. There's no chance.
And if you think $150 is expensive to get the digital versions of professional pictures you had taken, maybe you should factor that into your schedule you're planning.
Yeah, we should have Tiff come in if she's around, because this is like a big part of the photography business model, and it's very challenging. If you are a customer looking for a photographer who will give you the digital files at a reasonable cost, especially and give you the right to print them yourself if you want to and post them to Facebook and everything, that is not common among photographers. It's slowly becoming more common, but it's still very uncommon.
Well, it's common, but they'll charge you $1 bazillion. They'll charge you so much money that you are deterred from ever doing that.
Now, the interesting thing about this, though, was to their credit, they did on the CD that came with these shitty versions of the digital pictures, they actually had a PDF, which was a copyright release for personal use. And that was extremely surprising to me because I remember when we were interviewing photographers for a wedding, and this was in 2007, the guy we ended up going for very clearly was extremely particular about how we were going to use the digital files he gave us. And he did give us unwatermarked, completely unmolested JPEGs of every picture he took. And in fact, when I asked him if he was going to strip the EXIF data, he looked at me funny and said, wow, I've never had anyone ask me that before. But that being said, he lectured us like 13 different times about how the only way you can use this is to print things for yourself and your family, anything else, and he will basically take us to court. And again, for the hospital pictures, it was very nice of them to include a copyright release. I don't know why it would ever be an issue, but nevertheless, if it is an issue, it's right there and I can print it and say, no, look, I'm just printing it for myself. I'm not trying to sell it. Here's the copyright release. I remember talking to Tiff about this at one point a year or two ago, just out of curiosity, because it struck me weird that he was that into holding the copyright for these pictures. And my understanding is he wanted to be able to resell the pictures he took of us to like wedding magazines and, bridal magazines and wedding dress magazines.
Well, that's not the real reason, because you can have like co-copyright. Like the photographer can retain the copyright of the pictures that he or she takes, but can also grant you the rights to do whatever you want with them.
And I think that's what basically sort of kind of happened with these hospital pictures. It was not exactly clear what happened with the wedding photographer pictures.
Yeah, that's well, and especially like the older photographers, like photographers who have been working like before digital, even like old school photographers. They make such a big percentage of their money from the prints and the books and all the crap that you have to buy like after the wedding. They make so much money from that if you ask them for the source, whether it's negatives or digital files, to go do whatever you want with, the reason why they don't want you doing that is because that's going to cut into a lot of their money. And it's a lot better. It's a simpler business model if you just charge more up front. Just say, all right, well, if I need to make $2,000 from your shoot, rather than charging $1,000 for the shoot and then $600 for each book that you want to order, and of course you want to get one from your grandparents and one from your parents and one for yourself and one for this aunt, instead of doing all that, just charge $2,000 up front and then just let them buy prints at cost. And that's what TIFF does. That's been TIFF's. I wish she should come in here and tell you this. That's TIFF's entire business model for her photo business. That's how she does it. She just charges more up front and gives people digital files, because what most people want to do is like post them to Facebook and send them to their friends and stuff, and like no one gets prints anymore.
Right, exactly.
And she has like she's integrated with a big professional printer, and she just offers those prints at some tiny margin above cost, like to make it worth her like sending the files in, or she's basically offering them at cost, so people can get professional prints made, but most people don't, and that's what most people want. Most people want that out of their photographer, and the younger photographers are more likely to be willing to do that. But it's still a problem when you get like one of the old school ones who still wants to do things the old fashioned way, where you spend hundreds of dollars for prints after the fact.
Yep. And it's funny because just the other day, I don't know why I did, but I went looking up to try to find the photographer or wedding photographer's website to see kind of if he was, still around or whatever. He's definitely not a wedding photographer anymore. So I'm pretty sure I'm okay on the copyright stuff because apparently he's not really making money from it anyway.
75 years after he dies, you can do whatever you want with them.
Hooray!
Yay, U.S. copyright law.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. I should be getting this new CD in a week or two, but it also strikes me as extremely peculiar that it is the year 2014 and I'm still waiting on a CD to get digital copies of pictures that were taken 2 weeks ago.
And you probably paid quite a premium for that CD.
Oh, hell yeah. It was around $150, and we did get a few prints out of it. But to your point a minute ago, basically it was the CD is $130 or something along those lines. and for $20 more, you could get like 13 prints. Again, I'm making up the details, but something along those lines. And so at that point, it's like, well, why not just get the 10 prints or whatever, and for the $20. And so we got like a humongous picture of Declan that's like 15 by 10 inches or something like that. But
right. And why not just charge $120 for the shoot and have them email you the photos?
Exactly.
That's like, they'll make more that way. It's actually like they're wasting their money making this stupid printed crap, and nobody wants it.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Well, don't forget to actually make prints, though, because you want to have everything digital. You want the original files, but if you want the aliens to dig up pictures of your child after human civilization is wiped out, you got to have paper ones so they'll get compressed with all the rest of the stuff and maybe be preserved in some little bubble, and they'll be able to find those. Because they won't be able to read your digital stuff, even for your things. Like if you have a catastrophic data loss or something, it's good to have like prints of your family at relatives' houses.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see, but I'm very anxious to see what happens. And I had somebody in the chat, I think it was Brian Ash, somebody said something along the lines of, what happened with my email was a secretary read it, thought that the CD was damaged, and I am about to get another copy of the exact same CD that I already have, which is probably true.
We just took formal pictures. We're on a yearly schedule at this point, and we just took them, yesterday, actually. And the CD they gave us for the first time was unreadable. So that was a shame.
Can you get like a replacement? Or
yeah, we got a replacement. Like, okay. But it was unreadable in a way that revealed the first set of terrible Yosemite bugs that I've seen. Is if you stuck an unreadable CD in, the Finder freezes, and eventually everything freezes, and I had to hard power down on my Mac, which was sad.
Oh, that's cool.
It doesn't even say like this disk is unreadable or like, it's just, it was totally useless. So and does it while spinning the CD at high speed. Yeah. I tried it in both of my optical drives, the optical drive on the MacBook Pro and the optical drive on my Mac Pro at work, which didn't freeze. The Mac at work and the Mac here didn't freeze, but my Mac Pro did. Anyway, it was sad. We got they put it on a thumb drive for us and gave us a new CD, so it was fine.
Yeah, Tiff actually started usually for like her bigger photo packages, she would always get these beautiful custom CDs printed by the photo printing company with the custom booklets and everything. The problem is like, who has a CD drive anymore? Like those are on their way out for most people's computers. Like it is very possible if you make a CD for a photo client this year, they might not own a computer that can read it. And so she finally started switching over to thumb drives for the big clients, and for the small ones, she just sends them a Dropbox link. that's all most people need. Like all this physical media is so quickly becoming outdated.
When we got the Synology, one of the first things I did was I took our 2 or 3 DVDs full of wedding pictures and immediately put them on the Synology, not only because I was scared that eventually we wouldn't have a DVD drive in the house, but even more so, and I think, John, you've talked about this a lot in the past, what if those DVDs eventually rot to the point that I can't read them anymore?
Oh, yeah, I have tons of optical discs that are probably bad. Actually, I pulled a bunch of old like anime and stuff. I had off optical discs, and I think most of them are good, but that's the thing with no data integrity. I have no way of knowing. I put them all in the Synology, but until and unless I watch every single one of them through at 1x speed, I don't know which one of them have gone corrupt. I'll never know.
Yep. So yeah, so that's not wedding photography. That's baby photography in the year 2014.
See, we talked tech. Mike should be happy with that.
Yeah, actually, that did kind of work out, didn't it? I didn't think of it that way. That's pretty funny.